Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'm back with a very special review. This is the Shirogorov collaboration with Brad Southard. It's called the Russian Flipping Tanto, or RFT for short. This is one of a handful of Shirogorov's collaborations. These are usually very high-end pieces. They're limited quantity. I believe most of them are 200 pieces total worldwide. This is number 100 of 200. I recently saw, I was browsing Facebook, which is a mistake always for the knife community. And I was on the Shirogorov group, and there were a number of things that people were trying to move, and this was one of them. There was also John Barker Shirogorov Russian Hokkaido, which piqued my interest, and so I had decided to do something that I've been thinking about doing for a long time, and that is getting rid of my specter. So I floated my specter up as a trade bait, and it's a specter. So very quickly I made a deal with a great guy from the Netherlands, the previous owner of this knife, to make the trade. I was able to value my specter pretty highly given the market demand. My specter cost me $1,060, and I was able to use it as with a trade bait value of $1,600. So I was very happy I could get a good return on my investment for that. I say that because this knife, I don't know what the original retail price was, but these go from anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000. You can go on Arizona Custom Knives. That's where they've sold a bunch of them secondary, and like I said, they will go from $1,500 to $2,000 to $2,500 to $3,000, and I think maybe there was one up there for $3,500. So I don't know. They just go for all over the place, and so I knew if I was going to get one, I was going to have to use my biggest bargaining chip in my collection. That's my specter. I had mixed feelings about the specter, and I probably mentioned that in my specter video. Great knife. I really liked it. It's super solid, so simple, and so fantastic. But for whatever reason, it didn't really have a special place in my heart, other than just the clout. Given there's so few of them and they're so hard to get, I just felt like keeping it was the only reason I was keeping it was just to be part of the exclusive club. And so when I saw this guy come up, I knew, there's only 200 of these in the world. And so from the second I saw the picture of the RFT, I knew I wanted one really bad. And I'm a sucker for Shirogorovs, and I have been inching my way up closer and closer into the higher end price range of the Shirogorov knives. So I knew I was going to have to, it was going to cost me to get this guy, so I did, and I'm happy with it. I really like this knife. A little bit later I'll talk about my plans for this knife, but let's get to the point of the video, which is just giving an overall review on this beautiful piece of work. To start, obviously it has full titanium construction, as you can probably tell by the kind of the oily fingerprints that you can see coming up in the light, which the lighting is poor. I apologize. It's kind of a cloudy day, and I don't have a good lighting setup to counteract the light that's coming in through the window. But yeah, so full titanium construction. It's a very slim knife and extremely long. Overall length is over 9 inches. I think it's about 9 1/4, with the blade being almost 4 inches long, 3.94, and the handle making up the remaining 6.24. Weighs just over 5 ounces, even though it has some significant internal milling, which I doubt we're going to be able to pick up here in the light, but you might be able to see some. Some, yeah, right there we can see some on the inside, on the lock side scale. But yeah, I've taken this guy apart, and the construction is very interesting for Shirogorov, and I'll get to that in a bit. So full titanium construction, very long but extremely slim, and believe it or not, very, very unnoticeable in the pocket given how slim it is. And the flipper tab is extremely low profile, which if any of you guys have flippers out there and you carry your flippers a lot, you know that if there's something about a knife that's going to get in the way of or mess around and be in your pocket, it's going to be the flipper tab that's jutting out. So just a nice thing on this. This has the I think they're the custom division pivots, not custom, but custom division pivots, and Shirogorov has a lot of kind of ranges of trim level, I guess you could call it. They have the regular production models, they have the 3 bears, they have collaborations, they have custom division, and then above that there's full-on customs. Full-on customs have what they call the duckbill pivot. This is the custom division pivot, I believe. As you can see, it's much more rounded and chamfered with a little bit of polish going on the edge, and they also have the nice blue pivot collars. This is the actual pivot screw. You can see it's very angular and like what you would use to basically unscrew the knife. And that kind of goes into the construction. My favorite thing by a mile on this knife, if we can see if we can get to focus, is on the center groove. And if you look down, yeah, here we go. You can see there's just tiny little swirls milled in that handle, and it's very reminiscent of like a fingerprint, but it's carried through the entire middle kind of lane of this handle. And they're so intricate, and you can barely even feel it when you run your finger down there, but if you look at it up close, it's amazing. It's so beautiful, and it's very reminiscent of Dmitry Sinkovich's Drunken pattern, which if you guys have like a Spyderco Drunken, that has the same pattern on the carbon fiber and on the titanium lock side. And it also carries on the lock side over here. You can see even into the lock bar kind of relief, or pocket clip relief. I'm not really sure what you call that because the lock bar cutout is on the inside of the lock bar. But yeah, it carries through the center line. It is not, excuse me, it is not included on the pocket clip. Pocket clip is just still a smooth finish. Beautiful big backspacer with a lanyard loophole, kind of how Shirogorov likes to do it, where it's kind of recessed into the knife handle itself and it's not jutting out. Yeah, this guy, the one thing about this knife that is not perfect is it's a little bit off center, but I don't really care. That's never been a big stickler thing for me, especially with something with tight tolerances as this, where there isn't really a whole lot of room for the blade to look bad if it's off center. So yeah, just a beautiful knife, very well made. And so the construction, as I hinted at earlier, is very unique on this knife, and I've not taken apart other Shirogorov collaboration knives, only regular production models. And with the regular production models, you have a free spinning pivot, which sucks. And anybody who takes their knives apart a lot will tell you that free spinning pivots suck, and they're the worst, and they shouldn't, like every knife should have a fixed pivot. But anyway, here I'll just use this guy as an example, my F95. Free spinning pivot, which means as you turn the pivot to try and unscrew it, like the entire pivot will move, and so you have to either like I use I have no idea what they're called, the little like jar opener things, the little flat pieces of rubber. I usually end up using one of those and just kind of press it up against here as hard as I can to turn the pivot. So yeah, regular Shirogorov's free spinning pivot. You use ball bearings as the kind of, I don't know what to call it, the action mechanism, whatever. This in particular has single row bearings, which means there's just one little ring of bearings. My Hati, my 111, and my Neon all had MRBS, or multi-row bearing systems, which means there's kind of 3 bearings in a row next to each other, and that kind of just repeats itself all the way around the circumference of the bearing casing or the housing. And all the Shirogorov knives use bearings that are not caged, meaning they're loose. If you take the knife apart, they will fly everywhere. Happens to me all the time. That's why I use a soldering mat with little like itty bitty partitions to put the bearings in so they don't go anywhere. Let's see what else, if there's any other difference in constructions between these regular guys. Internal milling is standard on all of them. So yeah, you usually get the pivot, you get the body screw, and then you also have body clip screw. However, on this knife is unique because A, the kind of screw pivot is on the back, and something that I did not realize until I was going to put the knife back together is that on this pivot, this is the show side, which means there's like the actual pivot where the blade moves around, carries through all the way to this side, and this is just like a cap screw. There is a single ball bearing, right? It's indented in the top of this screw, and then there's an indent in the scale itself right here in front of the pivot collar. So what that does is it provides a like kind of almost a locking and making it a fixed pivot, but it's not, because the bearing is loose and it'll fall out. You can take it out, you can do whatever you want. But what it is it provides a spot for the pivot to kind of get into a fixed position along the handle, meaning that when you put this knife back together, it will always look like this. The pivot will always have the open side facing down, and it will always be vertical, so that it essentially has a fixed pivot, which is really unique. And like I said, I've not encountered other Shirogorovs that have that, and so I was really surprised by that, because like I said, I've not seen that elsewhere. So that was very unique just from my perspective. Yes, there's significant internal milling, and there's kind of like monikers on the inside. It's got the little Shirogorov logo on this side, and then it's got the single row roller bearings, SRRB, which basically means they're little itty bitty cylinders. They might be about the same size as the ball bearings, probably a little bit bigger, but they're little cylinders. And it provides a very hydraulic action, and not that, this Shirogorov, my F95 is extremely hydraulic, given that it's only single row bearings. Like, it's not drop shut in the sense that it's a guillotine, but as soon as you get it going, it will just kind of glide closed, and that's very similar to what this does, but this uses an entirely different mechanism to do it. This is more of a drop shut, probably in between a drop shut and a hydraulic, I would say. Super smooth, fantastic action. But so those roller bearings are also not caged. So when I took it apart, I had to, make sure they're all lined up and put them back in the casing or the housing, whatever you'd like to call it. And they are even more of a pain to deal with than regular ball bearings, which is surprising, I imagine. It was surprising to me, because the cage, the cage for the bearings, it's so perfectly sized for each bearing that if you don't drop it in the exact right way, then you have to basically take it out, start all over again, fiddle with it, try and push it in, do whatever. And then there's oil on it, so it'll stick to your tweezers and blah, blah, blah. And it's just a kind of a pain to do. But, so yeah, so there's one row on this. On custom divisions, there are double row roller bearings, which, as you might imagine, there's like an inner row or inner circle of bearings. It's not like spaced out evenly, and then there's an outer ring with like twice as many bearings. So, like I said, I've not encountered it. I don't have a custom division yet, so I will have to report back when I get one eventually to see if the construction is any different. The other interesting thing about this knife is that there is the pivot screw. There is no body screw, but rather the pocket clip screw goes all the way through to the show scale, and that's what is the kind of the second anchor point, or the pin, I guess you could say. And then there is a second tiny little itty bitty pin right here in front of the body screw that kind of holds the pocket clip in place when you're screwing this back in to put the knife back together. And the backspacer has 2 other pins, I think. Yeah, I think they're like right here. One of the ones right here, one might be lower down, but it also has 2 screws, or 2 pins rather, and actually you can see them. I don't know if you'll be able to, but I can see them. They're kind of glinting in the sunlight. But yeah, there's 2 screws right here that they hold the backspacer in place while you're putting the knife back together. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. It was just really that the fixed pivot, the nature of the pivot, as well as the fact that this is just one very long screw that's holding the body together at the bottom is very, very interesting to me. And like I said, very different from the other Shirogorovs that I've encountered. So, I think we covered everything about this knife: price, the specs. We can do a size comparison. So like I said, this guy is about 9 1/4 inches long, and so I'll bring up the F95 again, because F95 is probably the most common Shirogorov, I would say. Maybe the Neon is more common than this. Pretty close in size, honestly, which is surprising to me, actually. Handles are damn near the same. Blades are different. If I line up the pivots here, you can see, obviously the RFT blade is a little bit longer, and it's definitely got some more cutting edge, a little bit more surface area. So we will leave the F95 there and line them up by the butt. Bring out the Arius. Arius is also kind of in that golden sized range for me. Very similar size to the F95. So, and then if we bring out, do the Benchmade 940. Another very common knife. You can see that, if we line up the pivot there, you can see the handles, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch shorter, blade closer to 1 inch shorter. And then we'll look into the Microtech Ultratech. There's not really a pivot to line up here, so we can just line up by the butt, not including the glass breaker. Obviously, again, much smaller. RFT is a big knife, but like I said earlier, it's very slim, and so it fits very well in the pocket. Surprisingly well. Very hard to notice. As for my personal thoughts on this knife, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I think it is just drop dead gorgeous. It is so pretty, and I've really enjoyed fooling around with my light box that I have that I use to take my thumbnail photos, and I've taken some other photos, so if you guys want to check those out, you can see them on Instagram and on Reddit. I post both of those. I'm not going to say regularly, but I have a decent amount of posts on Reddit and a little bit less on Instagram, and I think those are both linked in my profile, or in my on my page, my channel page. The blade on this guy is gorgeous. It's got that kind of stone washed finish that Shirogorov does in all their knives. It's almost like it's almost reflective too. It's like a polished stone wash. I don't even know what to call it. Action is phenomenal. The blade is massive, so it really closes on its own very nicely. Another thing I'll mention is, which is again unique about this knife, is that when you're screwing the pivot back together on most knives, you have a really pretty generous range of tightness you can have on your pivot. You can turn it way too tight to where it won't even open, or you can turn it way too loose to where it's just flying all over the place and there's a ton of wiggle in the blade. But with this knife, again, something I've not seen before, it is the size of the pivot and the tightness of the screw is perfectly calculated to where you just screw the screw until it can't go in anymore, until you can't tighten it anymore. And that's like what this is, right? Well, it's not what this is right now, but it's like it's a little bit more hydraulic than this, but the screw just tightens, and that's it. You tighten the screw all the way, and then the knife is tuned in, which is pretty impressive, honestly. Like I said, I don't think I have any other knives where you just tighten the screw all the way and then you're done. What I chose to do with this guy is I loosened it just like hair, just a hair looser than the full tightness, and now I can get a bit more of a drop shut action with no blade play still. but it's not quite tightened all the way. What I did do accidentally is I just kind of tightened it a little bit to where I thought there was a good tightness, there was no blade play, and I closed it, and I almost cut my finger off because, like I said, this blade is huge, and I just a hair looser than this is right now, and it would just like rocket shut, and a true finger guillotine. So just another interesting design piece about this knife, just that you can really kind of tune the pivot in 3 main ways. You can tighten it all the way, and it's extremely hydraulic, very smooth glide. You can kind of have it in the middle like I do right now, to where it's more of a in-between drop shut and hydraulic. And then you can loosen it just a smidge more and it'll just cut your finger off. So, fantastic knife. As for my plans for this, so I traded my Spectre for this knife. I did end up having to pay some cash on top just because there was about a $400 difference, because this knife was valued at $2,000 and my Spectre, like I said, was $1,600. So I had to sell my very colorful Spyderco PM2 along with my Benchmade bug out. Both didn't want to have to sell them, more so the PM2. I don't care about the bug out at all, but it was nice to have, and I got it for like $10. And that's, I think I explained that in my bug out video, so you can, if you're wondering how I got it for that, you can go look it up. But like I said, I really like this knife. I will say the one thing that irks me is that the flipper tab is so small and there's not really a good angle. Now I will say I've gotten better at it over the past couple days that I've been playing with it, and it's starting to bother me less and less, to the point where I don't even know if it bothers me anymore actually. But it's just weird, and when I handled it for the first time, I was like failing miserably. The D10 is kind of loose, but again, the blade is huge, so it's got a ton of momentum. And if your finger gets too sweaty, it's hard to open. So definitely the flipper tab is my least favorite part about this knife, but like I said, it's starting to bother me less and less and become a non-issue. So when I was initially trying to move my Spectre for something like this, there was a gentleman who was trying to get rid of his Shirogorov John Barker Russian Hokkaido collaboration, and I had offered him and this guy at the same time my Spectre, and the guy with the Hokkaido ended up saying no. This guy said yes, so here we are. But he was looking for an RFT, and so now that I have this, and while I do like it, I do not want to pass up the opportunity to try out the Russian Hokkaido, and so I will be mailing this guy out today, actually, the day I'm filming this, shipping it to Denmark, and he just shipped the Hokkaido this morning. So I am really looking forward to getting to try out another one of like probably my 2 favorite in terms of appearance collaborations. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to getting that. And of course, you know, if I don't like it, I can try and get another RFT. I did handle the Hokkaido at the Recon 1 store in California along with this guy. And I remember liking the Hokkaido more, so I'm hopeful about that. In terms of their collaborations in general, I handled the Sienkiewicz Pero, didn't like that. I handled the Sigma, also a Sienkiewicz design. I liked it a little bit more, but it's full carbon fiber construction, and if you watched my 111 video, I kind of talk about how I don't like the full carbon fiber construction. It feels too light for me. Like, I like my knives to have a little bit of heft to know that, you know, I remember they're there in my pocket, and then I'm still carrying them. Makes them feel a little bit stronger too, even though, you know, I'm not going to be prying anything with this or something stupid like that. So yeah, I think the Jeans is also a collaboration. I don't like that. So definitely the RFT and the Hokkaido are my 2 favorites. I did really like the 110 KS, which I think stands for Kickstop, the Lee Williams collab that just got sold, or just got distributed, whatever you want to call it, from Recon 1 just last month. I handled that one at Blade Show. and I just remember it being gorgeous. And they should have the RJ Martin collab coming out soon, I think. I don't know if that's going to be a production run like these are, or if that's a more limited quantity, but I remember seeing that at Blade Show too, and it was gorgeous. But anyway, so I'd say my top 3 collabs at this point, the ones that I've handled, are the RFT, the Hokkaido, and the 110KS. I remember the 110KS. The kickstop mechanism is kind of like this, where the flipper tab is super small, and so you kind of have to practice with it. So the Hokkaido, I think the Hokkaido's flipper tab is more in line with the F95 size. So I'm really, like I said, I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's a similar size too, so it's a beefy boy. It's also a lot thicker, I think, from what I've seen. So looking forward to that. I will be sure to film reviews for that and anything else that comes through my hands in that time. But I'm definitely slowing down in my acquisitions. I'm still going through college. I don't have a lot of extra cash on hand to kind of throw around, and I'm really getting to the point in my collection where I would really rather not sell anything to finance a knife, because I really love what I have right now. I had to sell my Hati. I really regret that. So I'm trying to, I think my collection is going to stay pretty stable from now on, and like I said, I don't have a lot of cash to throw around, so a lot of big life things happening coming up in the next year or so. I'm not going to be able to go to Blade Show this year, which really bummed me out. So I'm disappointed about that. So yeah, it is what it is. That's the downside of getting into a really expensive hobby way too young. So yeah, but thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I look forward to giving you my thoughts on the next knife. It's probably gonna be the Hokkaido, but it could be something else, who knows. But thanks. This has been the Shirogorov collaboration with John Barker, the RFT, or Russian Flipping Tanto. Or, I'm sorry, Brad Southard, not John Barker. That's the other one. This is Brad Southard.